I spent $52,000 on concrete and steel just to watch her life fall apart. And honestly, it was worth every single red cent. She thought, because she drove a pristine white BMW X5 and lorded over a brand new homeowners association, she owned my land. She was about to learn a hard lesson, one that's written in the dirt and dust of this state. In Texas, the deed is king, and a fancy car don't mean a damn thing when you're trespassing. My family has owned Willow Creek Ranch since 1940. My granddaddy bought these 50 acres with cash he'd saved up from breaking horses, and he passed it down to my daddy, who passed it down to me. It ain't the biggest spread in the county, not by a long shot, but it's ours. The soil is rich, the creek that gives the place its name runs clear, and the grass is good for raising the finest Angus cattle you've ever seen. My prize bulls, like old Samson with his shoulders as wide as a barn door, are worth 15 grand apiece on a good day. This land isn't just property, it's a legacy, paid for in sweat and sealed in blood. The only paper that matters out here is the deed filed down at the county courthouse, a brittle piece of history that says, this land belongs to a McCoy now and forever. For decades, the only neighbor I had to worry about was the occasional coyote trying to snatch a newborn calf. Life was quiet, governed by the seasons and the needs of the herd. Then came the bulldozers. On the 100-acre plot just east of my property line, a developer scraped the earth clean, tore out the old-growth oaks, and started laying down the bones of a subdivision they called Whispering Pines Estates. It was a sad sight, watching them pave over good pasture land to build a bunch of oversized, cookie-cutter houses stacked so close together you could pass a cup of sugar from window to window. My wife, Sarah, a schoolteacher with a heart softer than mine, just sighed and said, well, I guess the world's got to grow. I just grunted and checked my fences. The houses went up and the people started moving in, mostly folks from out of state drawn by the promise of country living with city convenience. They didn't know the first thing about the country. They complained about the smell of manure, the sound of my rooster at dawn, and the dust my truck kicked up on the gravel road. I ignored them mostly. Live and let live, my daddy always said. But then she arrived, Brenda Bradshaw. She bought the biggest house, the one right on the edge of the development that bordered my fence line, and immediately crowned herself president of the Whispering Pines HOA. The first time I met her, I was mending a stretch of barbed wire near the road. Her white BMW came crunching down the gravel far too fast, a cloud of dust billowing out behind it like a dirty storm. She slammed on the brakes right next to my truck and laid on the horn, a long, obnoxious blast that sent a shiver through my herd grazing nearby. I saw a couple of my heifers, heavy with calf, jump and scatter. I took off my hat, wiped the sweat from my brow, and walked over to her window as it purred down. She was a woman who looked like she was perpetually smelling something bad. Thin lips, a tight blonde haircut that looked like a helmet, and eyes that scanned over me and my dusty work clothes with pure disdain. "Can I help you, ma'am?" I asked, keeping my voice even. "You need to move your livestock," she said, waving a dismissive hand with perfectly manicured nails. "They're blocking the road. This is an access point for our community." I looked past her car at my cattle. A few of them had wandered onto the dirt path that cut across the corner of my pasture, the same path my family had used for 80 years to move the herd between grazing fields. It wasn't a road. It was my land. "Ma'am, with all due respect, this here is my private driveway on my private property, and those are my cows. They'll move when they're good and ready." She let out a sound somewhere between a gasp and a sneer. "This is unacceptable. The developer promised us scenic views and ranch access. This driveway connects directly to the community bridle path. It's a shared amenity." She said the word amenity like it was something sacred. I almost laughed. "Ma'am, the only person who has access to this driveway is me, the tax man, and anyone I personally invite. Your developer might have promised you the moon, but he doesn't own it, and he sure as hell doesn't own my driveway." I tipped my hat. "You have a good day now." I turned to walk away, but her voice, sharp and screeching, cut through the air. "I am the president of the Whispering Pines HOA, and I will be speaking to my lawyer about this. You can't just obstruct a community right away, you filthy redneck." That was the first time she called me that. It wouldn't be the last. I didn't turn around. I just kept walking back to my fence, listening to the sound of her tires spitting gravel as she sped off. Sarah met me at the back door when I came in for lunch. She'd heard the horn from the house. "Trouble?" she asked, her brow furrowed with worry. "Just a new neighbor," I said, washing the grime from my hands. "Thinks her HOA rules apply to my land." "Oh, Hank," she said, her voice soft. "Just be careful." "Always am," I replied. But I knew, deep down in my gut, that this was just the beginning. This wasn't a simple misunderstanding. This was a declaration of war, and on my own land. I don't ever plan on losing. The polite conversation at the fence line had failed before it even began. It was time for level 2. That weekend, I went into town and bought the heaviest duty chain and padlock I could find at the hardware store. I drove my tractor down to the entrance of my driveway, right where it met the paved road of her fancy subdivision, and installed a brand new, 10-foot wide steel gate I'd had sitting in the barn for just such an occasion. I looped the chain through it, snapped the lock shut, and hung a large professionally printed sign on it. It read in big bold letters, "Private property, Willow Creek Ranch, no trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." It felt good. Solid. A clear message. It took her less than 24 hours to respond. The next afternoon, I was out checking on a prize heifer, Sweet Caroline, who was due any day, when I heard the distinct whine of a power tool. I drove the ATV over to the front gate and found Brenda Bradshaw, dressed in designer athletic wear, holding a pair of bolt cutters. The padlock and a section of my brand new chain lay severed on the ground. She was just swinging the gate open. "What in the hell do you think you're doing?" I roared, my voice echoing in the quiet afternoon. I've never been a man who yells, but seeing her standing there, a smug little smile on her face as she desecrated my property, sent a hot flash of rage through me. She didn't even flinch. "I'm accessing the community bridle path," she said calmly, as if she were explaining something to a child. "Your illegal obstruction has been removed. I'll be sending you the bill for the emergency locksmith." "Locksmith? That's a pair of bolt cutters, and you're trespassing and destroying my property." I pointed a shaking finger at her. "I'm calling the sheriff." "Go ahead," she sniffed, waving her phone. "I've already alerted them to your hostile and threatening behavior. I have a right to be here. This is a recorded easement." That word again. Easement. It was the lie she was building her whole world on. "Show me the paperwork," I said, my voice dangerously low. "Show me the deed, the survey, any legal document that gives you the right to be on my land." She just laughed, a shrill, ugly sound. "I don't have to show you anything. My lawyer has all the documentation. You'll be hearing from him." She turned and gestured grandly to a couple who had pulled up behind her in a Lexus. "As you can see," she said to them, her voice shifting into a syrupy real estate agent purr, "Whispering Pines offers exclusive access to these authentic ranch trails, perfect for morning jogs or horseback riding." The couple looked nervously from her to me, standing there covered in dust and fury. I just stared at her, my mind racing. She wasn't just trespassing for herself. She was bringing prospective buyers onto my land, using my property as a selling point for her cheap little kingdom. This was more than just entitlement. This was fraud. I pulled out my own phone and started recording. The sight of it made her pause. "Get off my land," I said, each word spaced out and cold as ice. "Now." For a second, I thought she was going to argue, but the couple was already backing away, whispering to each other. She shot me a look of pure venom, got back in her BMW, and sped off down my driveway, kicking up dust over the very people she was trying to impress. I stood there for a long time, the video still recording, the severed chain in my hand. This was escalation. This was war. That night, I installed the first of 6 security cameras, all of them aimed at the gate. I bought a new, thicker chain and a lock that looked like it belonged on a bank vault. I knew she'd be back. I was counting on it. And that brings us to the incident that turned this whole thing from a property dispute into a blood feud. It was a week later. Sweet Caroline was in the front pasture, the one near the road, taking it easy. She was my best heifer, the daughter of a champion bull, and the calf she was carrying was worth a small fortune. I was watching her from the porch, drinking my morning coffee, when Brenda's white BMW came tearing down the road. She saw the new gate, the new lock, and the cameras pointed right at her. She didn't slow down. Instead, she laid on the horn, not a tap, but a solid 30-second blast of pure malicious noise. The effect on the herd was instantaneous and terrifying. It was like a bomb went off. The cattle, especially the pregnant heifers, panicked. They scattered in every direction, a chaotic stampede of black hides and wild eyes. And Sweet Caroline, heavy and clumsy, got caught in the middle of it. She tried to turn, to run, but her legs got tangled. I watched in horror as she went down, a ton of prime beef hitting the ground with a sickening thud. Another cow, blind with fear, trampled right over her. I was in my truck and moving before I even consciously made the decision. I flew down the driveway, my heart pounding against my ribs. Brenda was out of her car, screaming at the gate. "This is harassment! You can't lock me out!" I ignored her. I ran to Sweet Caroline. She was trying to get up, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Her leg was bent at an angle that made me sick to my stomach. It was a clean break. Worse, I could see she'd gone into premature labor from the stress and the fall. I put my hand on her side, trying to gentle her, but the pain and fear were too much. My prize heifer, the future of my herd, was ruined, and her calf was in mortal danger. I turned my head and looked at Brenda Bradshaw. She was still ranting about her rights, her lawyer, her HOA. She hadn't even looked at the animal she'd just maimed. All the anger, all the frustration of the past few weeks coalesced into a single point of cold, clear rage. I walked over to her, my boots silent in the dust. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. "You see that animal?" I said, my voice a low growl. "That's a $15,000 heifer you just crippled. That's a $10,000 calf you're killing. This is the last time, you hear me? This is the final warning. You are to never set foot on my property again. You are to never harass my livestock again. This is no longer a discussion. Stay off my land." She actually rolled her eyes. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. It's just a dumb cow. My lawyer will—" "I don't give a damn about your lawyer." I cut her off. "This is my land, and you are no longer welcome on it. The next time you come through that gate, it won't be me you're talking to." I turned my back on her and called my vet, my voice shaking with a mixture of grief and fury. Dr. Adams said he'd be there in 20 minutes. It was too late for Sweet Caroline's leg, and the calf was born too early. It didn't make it through the night. I had to put Caroline down the next day. I buried them both out by the old oak tree, and with every shovelful of dirt, my resolve hardened. She had drawn first blood. Now I was going to finish it. The paper war was about to begin. After the incident with Sweet Caroline, something inside me shifted. The polite rancher who tipped his hat was gone, buried with his best heifer. In his place was a man with a singular focus, the complete and utter ruin of Brenda Bradshaw. I knew I couldn't beat her by playing her game of screeching and threats. I had to beat her with facts, with paper, with the undeniable truth of the law. I had to build a case so airtight that not even the slickest lawyer could find a crack in it. My first stop was the county clerk's office. It's a dusty old building downtown, filled with the smell of old paper and history. I spent the better part of 2 days, hunched over massive, leather-bound books of deeds and survey maps, some of them dating back to the founding of the county. I traced the ownership of my 50 acres from the original land grant in 1876, all the way to the deed my daddy signed over to me. It was a perfect, unbroken chain. Then I pulled the records for the 100 acres next door, the land that was now Whispering Pines. I followed its history, too. The land had been sold and subdivided multiple times, but one thing was glaringly, beautifully clear. There was no easement, not a single mention in over 100 years of legal documents of any right-of-way, bridle path, or community access point crossing my property. My driveway was exactly what I'd always said it was. Mine. I paid the clerk for certified copies of everything. My deed, my grandfather's deed, the original 1940 survey map that clearly showed my property lines and the private drive, and the survey for the Whispering Pines development, which showed their property ending abruptly at my fence. I had the truth in a manila folder, legally binding and undeniable. This was my ammunition. Meanwhile, Brenda was launching her own offensive. A few days after I buried Sweet Caroline, a shiny truck from the Environmental Protection Agency rolled up to my gate. A young man in a polo shirt with an official-looking badge got out and explained that they'd received an anonymous complaint about illegal dumping of hazardous materials and contaminated runoff from my cattle operation, poisoning the local water table. It was so absurd I almost laughed. My ranch runs on a closed-loop system. The creek is cleaner downstream of my property than it is upstream. I spent 4 hours walking the inspector over every inch of my land. He tested the water, took soil samples, and inspected my manure compost system. He was thorough and professional. At the end of the day, he shook my head. "Mr. McCoy," he said, "this is one of the cleanest operations I've seen in years. Your land is immaculate. I'm sorry to have wasted your time. The complaint was baseless." He wouldn't tell me who filed it, but he didn't have to. I knew. I thanked him for his time and made sure to get a copy of his official report declaring my ranch in perfect compliance. Another piece of paper for my file. A week later, it was the county sheriff. 2 deputies this time, looking uncomfortable. "Sir," the older one said, "we got a call about animal cruelty. A report that your livestock are malnourished and living in unsafe conditions." This time I did laugh. I led them out to the pasture where my Angus bulls were grazing. Samson, my prize bull, looked up from a patch of lush clover, his coat shining like black satin in the sun. He was a 2,000-pound mountain of muscle and contentment. The deputies looked at Samson, then at the rest of my healthy, well-fed herd, then back at each other. "Looks like they're doing all right to me, Earl," the younger deputy mumbled. "Yep," Earl agreed. He turned back to me, his face apologetic. "Sorry to bother you, Mr. McCoy. Seems like we got a false report." "It's becoming a habit," I said, my voice flat. "The woman next door, Brenda Bradshaw, has been harassing me and my animals for weeks. She's the one who crippled my heifer." I showed them the video from my security camera of her honking the horn and causing the stampede. Earl's jaw tightened as he watched it. He couldn't do anything without a formal complaint, but he made a note of it in his log. More ammunition. The final piece of Brenda's assault was the media. She called the local news station, the one that loved a good David versus Goliath story, and she painted herself as the victim. They ran a segment on the evening news. It showed Brenda, her face a mask of fake concern, standing in front of my locked gate. "This man, this wealthy rancher," she said, her voice trembling, "is illegally blocking access to a path that has been used by this community for years. He's cutting off families and children from the nature trails they were promised when they bought their homes. He's holding our community hostage." They cut to a shot of my private property sign, making it look as menacing as possible. They didn't interview me. They didn't check the county records. They just ran her story, hook, line, and sinker. The phone started ringing. People I'd known my whole life were calling, asking if it was true. My wife, Sarah, was devastated. She was a teacher at the local elementary school, and suddenly her colleagues were looking at her sideways in the faculty lounge. "They're making you look like a monster, Hank," she said that night. Her eyes filled with tears. "It's not fair." "It's not about being fair," I told her, pulling her close. "It's about winning." And she just made her biggest mistake. The news story was a public declaration, and it gave me the final piece of the puzzle I needed. That's when Eddie the mailman came into play. Eddie's been delivering mail in this county for 30 years. He knows everything about everyone. I caught him at the end of my driveway the next day. I offered him a cold bottle of water and just let him talk. He leaned against his mail truck, wiping his brow. "That Bradshaw woman is a piece of work," he started, unprompted. "All that junk mail she gets. Collection notices. Letters from lawyers. Looks like she's in a world of hurt. Heard her divorce from some big shot oil man up in Dallas didn't go her way. And these houses, he gestured toward Whispering Pines. She's not just the HOA president. She's the lead agent for the whole development. She gets a commission on every single house that sells. And then he delivered the payload. I hear her talking to clients on her porch sometimes when I drop off packages. She's promising them all exclusive ranch access and private equestrian trails. She's selling your road as a luxury amenity, Hank. Says it right there in the sales brochure. That was it. The final nail. It all clicked into place. Her desperation, the fake easement, the relentless attacks. She wasn't just an entitled neighbor. She was a desperate fraudster. Her entire financial future was built on a lie. And that lie was built on my land. The more houses she sold with that promise, the deeper the hole she was digging. If that amenity were to suddenly, permanently disappear, her sales contracts would be voided. She'd face lawsuits from every single person who bought a house from her. She'd be bankrupt, ruined. I went inside and sat down at the kitchen table with my folder of documents. The deeds, the surveys, the EPA report, the notes from the sheriff's visit, and the link to the news story. I looked at Sarah. The worry was gone from her eyes, replaced by a quiet, steady resolve. "You're planning something," she said. It wasn't a question. "I am," I said. "It's going to cost a lot of money. The money we were saving for the new barn." She reached across the table and put her hand on mine. "A barn is just wood and nails, Hank. Our peace of mind, our legacy. That's priceless. Do what you have to do." And that's when I knew I was going to build the wall. It wouldn't just be a fence. It would be a monument. A 12-foot tall, steel-reinforced, solid concrete declaration of where her world ended and mine began. It was a $50,000 solution to a one-woman problem, and it was going to be the most satisfying check I'd ever write. If you're enjoying this story of an HOA nightmare, getting a dose of concrete reality, do me a favor and hit that like button. Subscribe if you want to hear more tales of ranch life and property line justice. Now back to how I turned my $50,000 problem into her $1 million catastrophe. The first phone call I made was to Big Mike. Big Mike is a contractor who looks like he was carved out of granite and chews on nails for breakfast. He's a man of few words, but the things he builds are meant to last until the end of time. He hates two things in this world: shoddy workmanship and entitled city folk who move to the country and try to change it. He was the perfect man for the job. He rolled up to the ranch in his beat-up Ford F350, a cloud of dust and tobacco spit announcing his arrival. I walked him down to the front of the property, to the 300-foot stretch that ran along the edge of the Whispering Pines development, encompassing my gate and driveway entrance. She's been cutting my locks, harassing my herd, and claiming she owns a road that's been in my family for 80 years. I explained, keeping it simple. Big Mike grunted, kicking at the dirt with his steel-toed boot. "Seen it 100 times. They think an HOA membership card is a deed to whatever they can see." He looked along the property line, his eyes measuring. "What are you thinking? Taller fence? More cameras?" "I'm thinking bigger," I said. "I want a wall, Mike. A real one. 12 feet high, solid concrete, steel rebar reinforcement. I want it deep enough that a bulldozer couldn't push it over, and thick enough that a car would turn into an accordion if it hit it. I want it to be the last word in property lines." A slow grin spread across Big Mike's face. "An agricultural security barrier," he said, the words tasting good in his mouth. "Got a nice ring to it, and it's perfectly legal for protecting valuable livestock from harassment and trespassing. The county can't say boo about it." He spat a stream of brown tobacco juice. "Gonna be expensive." "I've got $52,000 in the cattle fund," I said. "Can you do it for that?" He looked at the property line, then back at me, his eyes twinkling. "For you, Hank? And for the chance to see the look on that HOA lady's face? I'll make it work." He shook my hand, his grip like a vice. "Even a tank ain't getting through this." The key to the whole plan was timing. I found out from Eddie the mailman that Brenda was planning a huge summer sales event for Whispering Pines. It was scheduled for a 3-day weekend starting on a Friday. She had ads in the local paper and on the radio. She was bringing in a catering truck, pony rides for the kids, the whole 9 yards. It was her big push to sell the remaining lots. It was also the perfect weekend to build a wall. I paid Big Mike in cash. He pulled the permits the next day, listing the project simply as an agricultural security barrier installation. Everything was legal, above board, and by the book. We were ready. The Friday of her open house dawned bright and clear. By 6 a.m., the first of the heavy equipment started arriving. A massive excavator rolled off a flatbed, its steel tracks chewing up the shoulder of the road. Then came the concrete trucks, 5 of them lined up and waiting, their massive drums churning. Big Mike's crew, a dozen hard-faced men who looked like they wrestled bears for fun, got to work immediately. The sound was glorious, the roar of the excavator's diesel engine, the grinding of the auger drilling deep holes for the steel support pillars, the shouts of the men. It was the sound of progress, my progress. Brenda must have heard it from her house. Around 7:30 a.m., her white BMW came squealing to a halt at the end of her driveway. She got out, dressed in a crisp white pantsuit, ready for her big day. Her face, which had been arranged in a smile of corporate welcome, collapsed into a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. "What is the meaning of this?" she shrieked, marching toward the property line where Big Mike was directing the excavator. "You can't do this. I have an open house." Big Mike, who stands a good 6'5" and is about 3 feet wide, just turned slowly and looked down at her. He took a long, deliberate spit of tobacco that landed inches from her designer shoes. "Ma'am," he rumbled, "we're installing a security barrier for Mr. McCoy. Got all the permits. Perfectly legal. You are obstructing my business. You are creating a public nuisance. I am calling the police," she screamed, her voice cracking. "Go right ahead," Big Mike said, turning his back to her. "Tell him to bring coffee." She did call the police. The same 2 deputies, Earl and his young partner, showed up about an hour later. Brenda ran to their car, a torrent of accusations pouring out of her mouth. They listened patiently, then walked over to Big Mike. He handed them a clipboard with the work order and a copy of the permit. Earl looked it over, looked at the flurry of activity, and then walked over to me. I was standing by my truck, just watching the show. "Everything seems to be in order here, Hank," he said with a slight shrug. "It's your property. You can build a fence on it." "Appreciate you coming out, Earl," I said. He nodded toward Brenda, who was now vibrating with rage. "She's claiming this is all just to harass her." "After what she did to my heifer," I said quietly, "I'm just protecting my herd. Can't be too careful." Earl's expression hardened with understanding. He walked back over to Brenda. "Ma'am, there's nothing we can do. This is a civil matter. They have a permit, and it's their property." "A civil matter? My entire business is being ruined," she screeched at him. "Then I suggest you call your lawyer," Earl said, his patience clearly gone. He tipped his hat to me, and the deputies left. The prospective buyers started arriving around 10 a.m. They had to navigate a line of concrete trucks and listen to the roar of heavy machinery as they drove into Whispering Pines. They were greeted by the sight of a massive trench being dug along the front of the property they were supposed to find so scenic, and a frantic, screaming real estate agent. The catering truck left. The pony ride guy took one look at the chaos and turned his trailer around. By noon, the foundation was poured, and the 12-foot steel I-beams were being set into the concrete. By the end of the day, the first section of the wall was up, a solid, imposing slab of gray concrete that blocked the scenic view of my pasture completely. It was beautiful. Brenda spent the entire weekend in a state of escalating panic. She called her lawyer, who apparently told her the same thing the cops did. She tried to get a stop work order from the county, but the permit was valid. She stood at the property line and screamed insults at the work crew, who completely ignored her. It was like watching a pressure cooker with a faulty valve. You just knew it was going to blow. The final act of her desperation came on Sunday afternoon. The wall was nearly complete. The last section to be finished was the entryway, where a new gate was being installed. This wasn't some flimsy tube steel gate. This was a custom-built, half-ton beast of reinforced steel, set on concrete pillars that went 10 feet into the ground. It was a gate designed to stop a semi-truck. Big Mike's crew had just hung it and were working on the automated opener. The wall stood tall and impenetrable on either side. It was a fortress, my fortress. Brenda must have seen it as her tomb. I was standing with Big Mike, admiring his handiwork, when we heard the roar of an engine. It was her white BMW, and it was coming down the road from her house at full speed. She wasn't slowing down. She was aiming directly for the new gate. "Get back," Mike yelled, shoving me behind a concrete pillar. There was a sound I will never forget. It wasn't a crash. It was a dull, final thump, the sound of 4,500 pounds of German engineering meeting its match. The BMW's front end crumpled like a tin can. The hood buckled, the engine block was shoved back into the firewall, and both airbags deployed with a violent whoosh. The car was totaled, an accordion of white metal and broken glass. And the gate, it didn't have a scratch on it. It hadn't even rattled. There was a moment of stunned silence, broken only by the hissing of the ruined radiator. Then, the driver's side door was shoved open and Brenda Bradshaw stumbled out, dazed, a trickle of blood on her forehead from where she'd hit the steering wheel. She looked at her destroyed car, then at the unblemished gate, and then at the wall stretching out in either direction, and she let out a scream. It wasn't a scream of anger or frustration. It was a scream of pure animal despair. The sound of a woman who had just realized she had lost everything. The police and an ambulance arrived. Brenda was hysterical, trying to tell the deputies that my gate had attacked her car. They just looked at the skid marks leading directly from her driveway to the point of impact and wrote up their report. They took her to the hospital for observation. Her beautiful BMW was hauled away on a flatbed, leaking its fluids all over the pristine asphalt of Whispering Pines. The open house was officially over. My wall was complete, but the war wasn't won yet. The final battle was still to come, and it wouldn't be fought with concrete and steel, but with cold, hard truth in the most public form I could find. The wall stood, silent and absolute. For a few days, a beautiful quiet settled over Willow Creek Ranch. The only sounds were the lowing of my cattle and the whisper of the wind through the grass. Brenda was nowhere to be seen. Her wrecked BMW was gone, and a rental car sat in her driveway. The for sale signs in Whispering Pines looked lonely and forgotten, but I knew this wasn't over. A woman like Brenda Bradshaw doesn't just fade away, she reloads. I was waiting for her next move, but this time I wasn't going to be on the defensive. I was going to set the trap and let her walk right into it. The opportunity came in the form of a flyer. Eddie the mailman slipped into my mailbox. The county was holding its annual Founders Day picnic and town hall meeting at the community park in 2 weeks. It was a big deal. Everyone would be there, the mayor, the county commissioners, the local news, and most importantly, the residents of Whispering Pines. The flyer noted a special session where the floor would be open for citizens to voice concerns about community development. It was perfect. A public stage with the press in attendance. I spent the next 2 weeks preparing. I met with a lawyer, a sharp old boy named Tom Peterson who had a reputation for chewing up slick real estate agents and spitting them out. I showed him my folder. He spent an hour looking through the deeds, the surveys, the EPA report, the police notes, and the videos. When he was done, he leaned back in his leather chair and a slow, predatory smile spread across his face. "Mr. McCoy," he said, "this isn't just a case of harassment. This is textbook real estate fraud. She's been selling property based on material misrepresentation. Every single sales contract she's written that mentions that amenity is null and void." He tapped the sales brochure Eddie had given me. "And this is the smoking gun. We've got her dead to rights." Tom's office drafted a packet of information. It included a cover letter explaining the fraud, a copy of my deed, a copy of the official county survey map, highlighting the lack of an easement, and a list of Brenda's false reports to the authorities. We made 50 copies. Tom also made a few phone calls, one to the district attorney's office, outlining a clear case for criminal fraud, and another to the State Real Estate Commission. The day of the town hall meeting was hot and sunny. The park was filled with families, the smell of barbecue smoke hanging in the air. I saw the residents of Whispering Pines huddled together, looking anxious and angry. They'd been sold a bill of goods, and my wall was the daily reminder of the lie they'd bought. Brenda was there too, holding court in the middle of them. She'd traded her pantsuit for a folksy-looking sundress, her face a carefully constructed mask of beleaguered concern. She was playing the part of the community leader, fighting for the little guy against the big, bad rancher. When the open forum began, she was the first one to the microphone. She launched into a dramatic, tearful speech about her community being terrorized. She talked about their broken promises, their stolen dreams, and the monstrous illegal wall that was a blight on the landscape and a symbol of one man's greed. She pointed at me, sitting in the front row with Sarah and my lawyer. That man, Hank McCoy, is using his money and influence to bully hardworking families. He needs to be stopped. A few of her neighbors applauded uncertainly. The mayor, a man I've known since grade school, looked uncomfortable. "Mr. McCoy," he said, "would you care to respond?" "I would," I said, my voice calm and steady as I walked to the podium. I didn't look at Brenda. I looked at the faces of the people she'd conned. "My name is Hank McCoy. My family has owned the land next to your development since 1940. I'm not here to talk about my feelings. I'm here to talk about facts." That's when Tom Peterson and his paralegal started moving through the crowd, handing a packet to every Whispering Pines homeowner and one to the reporter from the local news. "In your hands," I continued, my voice amplifying through the microphone, "you'll find a copy of my land deed. You'll also find the official county survey map. You will not find any easement, bridle path, or right-of-way on that map because one has never existed. The road Ms. Bradshaw has been promising you is, and has always been, my private driveway." A murmur went through the crowd as people started flipping through the documents. I saw faces changing from confusion to anger. They weren't angry at me anymore. "You've been told I'm a bully," I went on, my voice rising. "But the documents in your hand also include copies of the baseless and false reports filed against my ranch with the EPA and the Sheriff's Department, all originating from anonymous tips after I refused to allow Ms. Bradshaw access to my land. I'm not a bully. I'm a man protecting his property from a fraudulent real estate agent who sold you a lie to make a commission." Brenda's face had gone from pale to beet red. She stormed the podium, trying to grab the microphone from my hand. "Lies. These are all lies. He's a monster who tortures animals," she shrieked, completely unhinged. "Speaking of animals," I said, pulling my phone from my pocket and holding it up to the microphone. I hit play. The audio from my security camera filled the park's sound system. First, the sound of Brenda's obnoxious horn, then the terrified bellows of my cattle, and finally the sickening thud of Sweet Caroline hitting the ground. The crowd went silent. The sound was horrifying, undeniable proof of her cruelty. That, I said, my voice thick with emotion, was the sound of Ms. Bradshaw's entitlement costing me my best heifer and her unborn calf. Brenda stood frozen, her mouth open, her lies exposed to the entire town. The news camera was pointed directly at her. At that moment, as if on cue, 2 uniformed officers and a plainclothes detective from the DA's office walked up to the stage. "Brenda Bradshaw," the detective said, his voice calm but firm, cutting through the stunned silence. "You're under arrest for felony real estate fraud and filing false police reports." The handcuffs clicked shut around her wrists. The camera flashed, capturing her face, a grotesque mixture of shock and defeat. The residents of Whispering Pines just stood there, holding the proof of her deception in their hands, watching the woman who had sold them their dream homes get arrested as a common criminal. And I just stood there, leaning against the podium, watching the whole thing unfold. I didn't smile. I didn't have to. The wall had already done that for me. The aftermath was swift and total. Brenda Bradshaw's empire, built on a foundation of lies, crumbled into dust. She was facing multiple felony charges. The Real Estate Commission permanently revoked her license. Faced with a mountain of evidence and testimony from nearly every resident of Whispering Pines, she took a plea deal. She got 2 years in state prison and was ordered to pay millions in restitution to the families she had defrauded. Of course, she didn't have millions. She was forced into bankruptcy, losing her oversized house, her rental car, and every last shred of her dignity. The last I heard, she was out on parole, living with her sister somewhere up north. The Whispering Pines development went into receivership. The bank that held the loans eventually settled with the homeowners, restructuring their mortgages to reflect the actual value of their properties without the phantom ranch access. A few of them even stopped by my gate over the next few months. They didn't want access. They just wanted to apologize. They were decent people who had been taken for a ride by a predator. I accepted their apologies and even got to know a few of them. We're not friends exactly, but we're neighbors. The kind that respect fences. My life went back to the way it was. The quiet rhythm of the ranch returned. I used the insurance money from Brenda's car wreck, since she was found 100% at fault for destroying her own vehicle on my property, to buy a new prize heifer. I named her Caroline's Legacy. Sarah is happier than I've seen her in years. The tension that had settled over our home is gone, replaced by the peace that comes from knowing your land is secure, and the wall, it's still there. It's a bit weathered now, but it stands as a silent, 12-foot-tall testament to what happens when you try to take what isn't yours. It's a permanent reminder that in Texas, a man's land is his kingdom, and the deed is the crown. That $52,000 wall bought me more than just security. It bought me peace. It bought me justice. And watching Brenda Bradshaw get led away in handcuffs, I can tell you without a single doubt, it was worth every damn penny. They say good fences make good neighbors, but sometimes you need a 12-foot concrete wall to make a felon. If you enjoyed this pro-revenge, hit like and subscribe. Share this with anyone dealing with an HOA tyrant.